Look at a map of the United States. Two enormous oceans stand on either side. Canada lies to the north, Mexico lies to the south. Beyond them are thousands of miles of distance, allied territory, satellites, radars, ships, aircraft, ports, highways, and more than 300 million people. Now imagine a hostile government attempting something no modern army has ever achieved, crossing that distance, landing a major force on American soil, holding territory and continuing to supply that force while the United States fights back. Because attacking America and invading America are not the same thing. A missile can cross an ocean. A cyber attack can disrupt a city. A small force might carry out a raid. An invasion means arriving, surviving, expanding, supplying, and governing. And each one is harder than the last. So could any country actually invade the United States? The honest answer is more interesting than simply saying no. First, define the word. An invasion is not a single strike, and it is not a temporary attack. It is the movement of armed forces into another country's territory with the intention of seizing land, destroying resistance, or forcing political control. That definition immediately changes the scale of the problem. An attacker would not need only combat troops. It would need transport ships, aircraft, fuel, food, ammunition, spare parts, medical support, communications, repair teams, and a continuous route back across the ocean. Every soldier who arrives creates another daily supply requirement. A force that cannot be resupplied may still be dangerous, but it cannot keep advancing for long. This is why the first obstacle is not an American beach. It is the distance between the attacker and the beach. The Atlantic and Pacific are not magical walls. Modern missiles, aircraft, submarines, and ships can cross them. But moving an invasion force is different from moving a weapon. A large force requires a large transport network. That network moves more slowly than a missile and is far more difficult to hide. Ships must gather. Cargo must be loaded, aircraft must be staged, fuel and escorts must be positioned. Ports and airfields must prepare for unusual activity. The larger the invasion becomes, the more visible its preparation becomes. Intelligence satellites, maritime patrols, allied governments, and commercial tracking systems would all contribute pieces of the picture. Warning might be incomplete. Surprise would still be possible. But secretly assembling the force required to occupy American territory would be extraordinarily difficult. Then the force would have to cross waters watched by the United States, Canada, and allied networks. The United States Coast Guard says its maritime security mission includes protecting the American maritime domain, ports, and transportation system. The Navy, Air Force, and other commands would add deeper military layers beyond the coastline. An invasion fleet would not have to win one battle. It would have to protect a moving supply line across thousands of miles day after day while defenders operated much closer to their own bases. The defense of North America does not begin when someone sees a ship from the shore. NORAD is a combined United States and Canadian command responsible for aerospace warning, aerospace control, and maritime warning. Its public mission includes detecting, validating, and warning of attacks involving aircraft, missiles, or space vehicles. U.S. Northern Command describes major military threats to North America across maritime, aerospace, cyber, and weapons of mass destruction domains. That does not make the continent invisible or invulnerable. Sensors can fail. Information can be misunderstood. Cyber attacks can create confusion. Decoys and electronic warfare can make a clear picture harder to build. But a full invasion is not one object on one radar screen. It is a campaign involving ships, aircraft, communications, and logistics. Each movement creates another opportunity for detection. The first American response would therefore begin with information. What is moving? Where is it going? Is it a raid, a strike, or an attempt to seize territory? The faster that question is answered, the more defensive choices become available. In the popular imagination, an invasion begins with soldiers running out of landing craft. In reality, any force approaching the continental United States would first have to survive a contest in the air, at sea, in space, and across communications networks. American aircraft would not operate alone. Ships provide radar and air defense. Submarines threaten surface forces. Satellites and surveillance aircraft help build a wider picture. The Coast Guard protects ports and coastal approaches. Canada is already integrated into continental warning through NORAD. The exact response would depend on the threat and decisions made by civilian leaders. This documentary will not invent a battle plan. The important point is structural. The defender can use bases, ports, repair facilities, and fuel networks inside its own territory. The attacker has to bring most of those advantages across an ocean. Even a successful landing would not end that contest. The attacker would still need open routes for reinforcement. If those routes were disrupted, the troops on land would become isolated from the system keeping them alive. Suppose a hostile force somehow reaches American soil. That would be a historic failure of deterrence and defense. It would also be the beginning of the hardest stage, not the end. The United States is a continent-sized country with deserts, mountains, forests, rivers, farmland, and enormous urban regions. Capturing one location would not mean controlling the country. Holding a port would not guarantee that supplies could move safely beyond it. Entering a city would not create authority over the surrounding states. Occupation requires control of roads, railways, communications, energy, warehouses, and government institutions. It also requires enough personnel to secure what has been taken while other units continue moving. The defender would be operating inside a huge transportation system it already understands. The Department of Transportation describes the national freight network as an integrated system of highways, railways, ports, inland waterways, pipelines, and airports. Those networks can be disrupted, but they also create many routes for American movement and recovery. For the attacker, every mile inland would stretch the supply line farther from the coast. For the defender, many reinforcements would be moving closer to home. The active duty services are only one part of the American response. The National Guard reports roughly 433,000 soldiers and airmen serving across the 50 states, 3 territories, and the District of Columbia. They support combat missions, domestic emergencies, and homeland defense operations while remaining connected to local communities. Reserve forces, federal agencies, state governments, emergency managers, police, firefighters, hospitals, and utility crews would have different responsibilities. It would be a complicated national mobilization with uncertainty and delays. That complexity is a vulnerability because confusion can slow decisions. It is also resilience because no single headquarters, base, or city represents the entire national response. An attacker would not only face military units, it would face a distributed system capable of moving people, repairing infrastructure, protecting ports, restoring communications, and continuing government from many locations. An invasion of the United States would not remain a two-country problem. Canada is already part of the continental warning system. American forces and infrastructure are also connected to allies across the Atlantic and Pacific. NATO's Article 5 states that an armed attack against one ally is considered an attack against all. Each ally decides what action it considers necessary. So Article 5 is not an automatic movie scene in which every army moves at once. But an obvious invasion of North America would create political, intelligence, economic, and military consequences far beyond the United States. An attacker would therefore have to consider not only American forces, but the possibility of allied bases, intelligence, logistics, and pressure opening problems in other regions. This is one reason deterrence matters. The goal of alliances and visible readiness is to convince an adversary that the cost of starting the war would be greater than anything it could gain. None of this means the United States cannot be hurt. No country is invulnerable. Long-range missiles, drones, submarine sabotage, and cyber attacks could damage infrastructure and frighten millions of people. A surprise raid might penetrate a local defense. False information could create panic. Communications could fail exactly when clear instructions were most important. Modern conflict may also blur the line between peace and war. An adversary could attempt disruption without sending a conventional invasion fleet. It could target networks, navigation, supply chains, or public trust while denying responsibility. Those threats are serious, but they are not the same as occupying the United States. Destroying something from a distance can take minutes. Controlling territory requires people, supplies, and time. It exposes the attacker to resistance every day the occupation continues. America is not untouchable, but a full-scale invasion would demand extraordinary transport, protection, coordination, and endurance. For families, the first experience would probably not be a battle outside the window. It would be alerts, rumors, canceled travel, military movement, closed areas, and a flood of conflicting information. The safest action would depend on the verified threat. People should follow authenticated instructions from federal, state, and local authorities, not social media rumors or dramatic videos without a source. Hospitals would protect essential services. Schools and businesses would use emergency plans. Transportation agencies would manage routes. Utility crews would work to keep power, water, and communications running. Real preparedness is less cinematic than panic buying or rushing toward danger. It means reliable information, family communication, basic supplies, and cooperation with local instructions. Even an unsuccessful invasion attempt could separate families and damage communities. This scenario should be studied as deterrence and preparedness, not entertainment built on suffering. So could any country invade America? In the literal sense, no nation can promise that an enemy will never cross its border, enter its airspace, or land a small force. Technology guarantees that distance alone is not perfect protection. But a conventional invasion designed to seize and occupy large parts of the United States would be one of the most demanding military operations in history. It would likely become visible while forces were still assembling. It would have to cross defended air and sea approaches, maintain supply lines across oceans, fight a distributed American force, survive national mobilization, and account for Allied support. A local attack could succeed, infrastructure could be damaged, people could be killed. But landing is not conquering, and conquering is not governing. America is difficult to invade not because of one secret weapon, one wall, or one military branch. It is difficult because geography, warning networks, logistics, federal and state forces, industry, infrastructure, and alliances create layers an attacker would have to defeat again and again. Reaching America is possible. Holding America would be the nightmare.